I had never heard of SereneCare Clinic until that day. Tucked away in a quiet corner of Singapore, it wasn't the kind of place you'd stumble upon unless you were looking for it. And yet, there I was, standing in front of its unremarkable entrance, clutching my chest as the dull ache spread through my ribs. It started that morning, an odd, persistent pain that gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had tried calling my regular doctor, but their office was closed for some reason. Then, every other clinic I called was either fully booked or too far away. Finally, a colleague suggested SereneCare, claiming it was just a short walk away. She insisted it was the only place she could think of. Reluctantly, I agreed. After all, it wasn't like I had much of a choice. The clinic was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with a blank expression, barely glanced up as I approached. The only other sound was the ticking of a clock, its hands moving sluggishly, as if time itself was dragging its feet. "Appointment?" she asked in a monotone. "No, I'm a walk-in," I replied, wincing as another wave of pain shot through my chest. I think it's something with my heart. Fill this out." She handed me a clipboard with a single form attached. Basic information, nothing unusual. As I filled in the blanks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The receptionist didn't ask for insurance details, didn't even seem interested in my symptoms. When I handed the form back, she merely nodded and pointed down the hallway. "The doctor will see you now. Room 4. I hesitated. There was something unsettling about the way she said it, like a command rather than a reassurance. But the pain in my chest was growing worse, and I needed help. So I walked down the dimly lit corridor, past several closed doors, until I reached room 4. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a small examination room. It was old-fashioned, the kind you'd see in a clinic decades ago. Worn-out furniture, outdated medical equipment, and a faint, musty smell that clung to the air. A man stood by the window, his back to me. He wore a white coat, hands clasped behind him, and he didn't turn around as I entered. "Dr. Collins?" I asked, remembering the name the receptionist had given me. He nodded slowly before finally turning to face me. His appearance startled me. He looked out of place. His hair was slicked back, and he had a thin, tired face, the kind you'd expect to see in an old black and white photograph. His eyes, though, were what unsettled me the most. Dark, almost lifeless, with a gaze that seemed to pierce through me. "Please sit," he said, his voice low and measured. "Tell me about your symptoms." I sat on the examination table, feeling increasingly uneasy. There was something about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "It's my chest," I began, trying to focus on my breathing. "It's been hurting all day, and it's getting worse. I'm worried it might be something serious." Dr. Collins nodded, his expression unreadable. He stepped closer, placing a cold stethoscope against my chest. The metal sent a shiver through me, but his touch was strangely distant, as if he wasn't really there. "Breathe in," he instructed, and I did as he asked. His hands moved methodically, but his gaze never left my face, studying me with an intensity that made me want to recoil. Finally, he stepped back. "You'll need to stay for further tests," he said, his voice eerily calm. I blinked. "Stay? But can't I go to the hospital?" "No," he said firmly. "You must stay here." A chill ran down my spine. Something was very wrong. I wanted to get up, to leave, but the door behind him seemed to loom larger, as if blocking my only exit. "Doctor, I don't think—" I began, but he cut me off with a look that silenced me immediately. "The tests are necessary," he insisted. "You won't survive without them." His words were like ice, freezing me in place. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get out, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear, by the growing realization that I was trapped. Suddenly, the door behind me creaked open. I turned, expecting to see the receptionist or maybe another nurse, but there was no one there. The hallway beyond was dark, the lights flickering dimly. Dr. Collins didn't move, didn't even acknowledge the open door. He just stood there, watching me with those hollow eyes. Then I saw it. A shadowy figure standing just beyond the threshold, indistinct but undeniably human. My heart pounded as I recognized the features. It was an older man, his face twisted in pain, his hand clutching his chest, the same symptoms I had. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, and then, as if in slow motion, he collapsed. I gasped, stumbling back against the examination table. When I turned back to Dr. Collins, he was gone. The room was empty, save for the ghostly presence that lingered in the air. My chest tightened painfully, the ache intensifying with every passing second. Suddenly, I understood. The clinic, the reason I was here, the unavoidable pull that had brought me to this place. It wasn't just a coincidence. The clinic wasn't a place of healing. It was a trap, a final destination for those who were already beyond saving. Dr. Collins wasn't a doctor at all. He was a ghost, a harbinger of death, luring in those whose time had run out. The shadowy figure in the hallway began to fade, and I knew then that I was seeing a reflection of my own fate. Pain in my chest became unbearable, and as I clutched at my heart, I realized I couldn't breathe. I tried to scream, to call for help, but no sound came. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the shadow reaching out to me, pulling me into the same abyss that had claimed all those who had come before. The clinic door swung shut behind me with a soft click. Outside, the world continued as usual, unaware of the secrets hidden within the walls of SereneCare Clinic. And inside, the receptionist prepared for the next patient, the next soul drawn irresistibly to the place where Dr. Collins would see them now, a doctor who only treated those who would never leave.